It's Amerie. I've been feeling pretty under the weather actually this month, so that's why I've been a little behind on things. I did have my style video last week, but that was a pre-filmed video, so I just had to edit it and then, put that up, how it goes. But I am here with the September wrap-up / Bookbuddyathon wrap-up and my October TBR. I actually read a lot of books this month, which is pretty surprising. This is not usual. Well, let's get into it. So I'm going to begin wrapping up what I read for Bookbuddyathon. My book buddy for Bookbuddyathon was Max from Well Done Books, and we read Half a King together by Joe Abercrombie. I actually squeezed in one more read. Out of the books that I was supposed to read, I managed 2 out of my 4 choices. So I will tell you about those first. Makes sense to start out with the book that I read with Max, which is Half a King by Joe Abercrombie. It's a fantasy YA. I hesitate to say YA because technically it is a YA. The protagonist is young, and I believe they meant for it to be YA. However, I don't see it in the YA section, number 1. It doesn't totally read as YA, number 2, for no reason other than something of it doesn't feel quite YA. And I think it's because I was doing a lot of thinking recently about fantasy books, adult fantasy books versus YA fantasy. Sometimes I'll get on YA books' case because I feel like the world building, I want to see it more, I want it to be deeper, I want it to be more broad, I want it to be epic in scope. However, what I can say is that I think when it comes to YA fantasy, there tends to be a lot more characterization. I could be wrong. Tell me what you guys think in the bottom, in the comments below, if you do agree with me on that or not. But that's just kind of what I was thinking of. I did enjoy this book a lot. Actually, Max and I both enjoyed this read, and I have book 2 on my iPad because I wanted to check it out. So I don't know if Max, if you're watching this video, have you read book 2 yet? Because I haven't. We both asked the library for our copies right away because we wanted to get into the next thing. It is a really, really cool book. It's not very long. Essentially, you have a young man who's the second son. He must step up to become king, even though he was always training to be something else, which has nothing to do with the military, because he only has one hand or one working hand, and he's not the golden child. But when his father dies and his older brother dies, he must fill in that role. I really loved where Abercrombie went on this journey. It wasn't expected. I thought where the character goes is such a cool thing you don't see all the time. My only gripe with the book is that I felt like there was a lack of character development across the board. Some of the things that happened in the story that were so important had the potential to be so much more impactful emotionally if there were more character development in the first half of the book. Still a great book, just a little note where I was like, I wish ... I do recommend this read, especially if you're into fantasy or you want to get into fantasy and you don't want to read something too huge. This is a pretty fast read. You'll probably be able to get through it in 1 or 2 sittings, not a couple of hours. This book is 330 pages or so. You'll be able to get into it. I recommend this one. One of the challenges was to read a book that your book buddy gave 5 stars. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I attempted this before. I told you guys this as well. I attempted it before and I dropped out somewhere around 112 pages or something like that for the reasons I explained in that video as well. I'm so happy I went back to this book. I really enjoyed it. You don't want to know too much going in, but what I will say is that this book had less to do with the sci-fi aspect, because there is a slight speculative fiction aspect in here. It had less to do with that and more, in my humble opinion, to do with what it means to have lived a life. There's a lot more I could add to that, but I don't want to spoil anyone else's reading experience. Like I said, knowing what I knew about the book, which wasn't a whole lot, but it was something essential, made me drop out at 112 pages. But I went back in because Max was like, yeah, that one. It's relatively thin. They did make a movie of it. I do plan on watching the movie. One of the things that I saw in the trailer was something that I was thinking about while I was reading this book. Why did they go along with this, and why don't they just leave? In the movie, as far as what they showed in the trailer, they answered that. Unless I wasn't reading carefully, unless I missed something, that was not addressed in the book. So they might have realized that when they were writing the screenplay. I don't know. But again, it's hard because I don't want to spoil it for you. So it's one of those books that's just hard to talk about when the person hasn't read the book. read this. It's pretty good. I recommend it highly. For those of you who've been paying attention, the Man Booker Awards had their long list, and recently they shortened down the list to 6 novels. Max started a Goodreads, a Man Bookering, a Goodreads group where you could talk about what you think is going to be shortlisted, what you think will take the whole prize. I planned on joining in, but I jumped into that pool really late. However, some of the books that I read were on the short list, so I kind of felt like, okay, I have enough knowledge to maybe be able to predict who I think is going to win. One of the books that have been shortlisted for the Man Booker Awards is A Spool of Blue Thread by Anne Tyler. It's a family drama. You go through a few generations. It centers around a house, an elderly couple, their children, everybody converges upon the house. We find out what's going on with their lives. We go farther back and see the old matriarch and patriarch of the family to see how they got together, how the family came into money. They're not super wealthy, but they're quite well off, and we see that we follow the story. I actually don't have too much to say about this book because although I did find it funny, it has one of the funniest opening scenes I've ever read. I was kind of like, I liked it. It didn't blow me away. I didn't dislike it by any means, but it's one of those books that are kind of like, okay. I liked it. Another book that I read this month that's been shortlisted for the Man Booker Awards is A Brief History in 7 Killings, A Brief History of 7 Killings. This is by Marlon James. This book was very fascinating. This book is a chunkster. It's huge. I think it was like 600 and something pages, almost 700 pages. I read it on ebook. That's good. I won't go too much into what it's about because I did go into that in my last TBR video. In a nutshell, we're in Jamaica and we're following the events that surrounded and included the assassination attempt of Bob Marley. We get to see what happened to the people who participated in the assassination attempt. And it goes from Jamaica to New York over a period of about 10 or 15 years. The subject matter is so fascinating to me. Every few chapters I would go onto the internet just to research a little more about Bob Marley, Jamaica, the history as far as what was going on with the upheaval in the government, and a lot of unrest, what life was like for everyone at that time in the 70s in Jamaica. Oh, and it's been optioned for an HBO series, so that's good. I think the author is working on the screenplay, and I can totally see that. I bet too that in the film they're probably going to make the characters more sympathetic, more human, a little more rounded out. First of all, the book is very violent. That's why it's kind of like a Quentin Tarantino-esque kind of vibe. I mean, it's just violent thing after violent thing, blood, gore, and it's very hard to read, a lot of it, because it's so violent and so descriptive, which I think is a good thing because I'm so used to reading books where the violence is depicted and is kind of sanitized a bit. No, in this book, you feel what the character's feeling because most likely it's from their perspective, like the characters who are killed, you're in their POV when it's happening. One thing could constitute a spoiler, but it's not a spoiler because there's so many deaths in this novel and it's so big. This is just one of them. But in one, this kid is being, and they're kids, a lot of these are kids who are dying. He's being buried alive, he's been beaten up, dragged, he's all scraped up from the concrete and from the wilderness, and they have him tied up and he's in a hole and they're just throwing dirt on him. They're burying him alive. It's not oh, he was buried alive and this is 3 lines, 5 lines, a paragraph. No, this is an entire POV section. You have pages, not too many pages either, maybe like 4 or 5, but pages of what he's going through when this is happening. The violence in this book is depicted as it is in real life. You know, it's not sexy, it's not glamorous. Some of my favorite sci-fi fantasy books, some of my favorite YA books have a lot of violence in them, but they don't feel like this. They don't feel real, which was making me wonder if that's better or not. The Hunger Games, when the spear goes through, when it comes out the other end, do we need to see intestines coming out? Because that's how it would be. It's not sexy getting stabbed with a spear. The violence in Hunger Games is not clean. So do we have a responsibility to show that in our work, in our art? Do we have a responsibility to show violence in all of its gore? Or would that just further desensitize us and make us all very insensitive? So it's better to not show the consequences of killing and brutality and violence so much, to clean up the blood, to make it not so bloody. It's kind of like when, this sounds really gross, but it's kind of like when they show people who jump out of a building and, you know, in the shows on, you know, television, on network TV, and they all look down, they're like, oh my goodness, the guy jumped off the roof. I was told by someone who knows what these kind of cases look like, that it does not look like that. And I was like, really? All this time I've been watching movies and I thought that the person's there, you see a little bit of blood by the head. They were like, no, the head explodes like a watermelon. So when the person's body is there, it's limp, it's twisted, and their head just explodes across the pavement like a watermelon. That just horrified me. So whenever I watch a movie now and I see it, I'm like, wow, that's so much cleaner than what it really is. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I mean, we don't need to see all that stuff, of course. It'd be too horrific to watch. But then why is it that we're okaying all the violence then? It's like violence without consequences. I don't know what the answer is, because you don't want to give someone nightmares, you don't want it to be straight up faces of death, but at the same time you don't want to just make it seem like, oh yeah, violence, someone jumps off the thing, someone pushes someone off the bridge, someone kills or stabs someone, someone shoots someone, and it stays nice and clean. It's just not real. Yeah, this was a long little thing because I've really been thinking a lot about this. Is it better to show the violence? And if you're going to show the violence, make it ugly, make it real. Or, and if you're not going to keep it real, don't show the violence. But violence is kind of entertaining, and we kind of do like that as a species. We like to see the violence. We have controlled violence in sports and boxing and ultimate fighting. So we kind of have bloodlust as a species. And do we just say, okay, this is a not so scary, not so dirty way of being able to get the violence out of our system? In one of the passages, Marlon James has someone describing the way a gun goes off. The person in the story says, it doesn't sound like it does on TV. It doesn't sound kind of like, and it's like reverberating and it's huge. It's just like a little pop. It's a little sound that does so much damage. Something about that was really poignant. I enjoyed the read. I was wondering if maybe it was a little too long, but I think the length had a lot to do with the fact that the story is told in stream of consciousness. So that of course takes a little while, especially because of the Jamaican dialect used. One of my criticisms of the book is that there's a lot of talk about sex and sexuality in the story. That's not my criticism. My criticism was that no matter whose POV it was, they tended to kind of sound the same. But that would kind of make sense because you have guys who are running in the same crews, because you have like different dons, and they're not really gangs, but they kind of are. It makes sense that everyone kind of view things the same way, especially because a lot of them are the same age, especially the teenage boys. But there is one female character in particular who is a main POV. The way she talks about her body, the way she's almost removed from her own sexuality, and how she sounded exactly like the teenage boys, when it referred to her genitalia, her sexual urges or whatever, it just kind of felt like it didn't really totally ring true to me. She didn't really feel like a female her age. She sounded like a 14-year-old boy, and the way he would talk about a woman's body. Overall, I really did enjoy this book. I do recommend it if you're willing to read a long book and be taken for a ride, and if you want to learn kind of about Jamaica, because I think he did a lot of research. Very interesting read. Very long read though. Oh my goodness, you guys. I finally finished 11/22/63 by Stephen King. You guys know how many times I've been talking about this book and how last time there was like no progress. Okay, so I made progress, finished reading it. Mr. King is a master. This was a fantastic blend of science fiction, historical fiction, and a dissection of small town living in the 1950s, in the area that lots of people like to feel nostalgic about, going back to simpler times, etc., etc. Mr. King does a great job of showing us that that simpler time had lots of issues. Yes, maybe the food tasted great and neighbors were friendly to each other, but they were only friendly if you were white. He makes sure that he really includes the full scope of what it was like to live in that time. I thought it was going to make one of my favorite books of the year, and it did not. Because up until about page 245, it is so gripping. Like, I could not put it down. I was like, this is freaking amazing. This might be one of the best books I ever read in my life. Then we got to the middle. The story really slowed down. So the middle had a lot of that small town living, the situation, what was going on, like the heart of the story, essentially. That's great, but it was a lot of subplot. What happened between here to here, the main plot, the thrilling bits, the things that I was promised in the very beginning and for the first 245 pages, it was happening, but it almost felt peripheral. Some people might not mind that, but I was so hooked on the first 245 pages, it felt like I was missing something. I was satisfied by the ending. I'm definitely looking forward to adding another Stephen King read very soon. Maybe I'll go to it, but I also might go for The Stand. So I recommend this if you want to go into something for the long haul. There are overwhelming 4.5 5-star reads for this novel. It's just that the middle was really slow for me, but it's really amazing if you're okay with that. Whew. So,
You've been